Western governments today spend vast amounts defending their countries from threats at home and abroad. But the risk of terrorism, insurgency and revolution was also present in the ancient world. An outnumbered militia developed firebombs that roasted Roman invaders alive. The first bomb sent by mail was intended to assassinate a European prince. A biological weapon of mass destruction resulted in the genocide of an entire city. And a daredevil descent down a mountainside sparked a manhunt for the world's greatest revolutionary gladiator, Spartacus. We also investigate a long-lost text from 700 years ago that helped change the course of American history in the 20th century. The unknown and violent history of revolutionary innovation is our ancient discovery. Terror, revolution, genocide, and insurgency are concepts as old as war itself. To understand the evolution of war crimes, Ancient Discoveries is investigating one of the earliest atrocities in history. Accounts by several ancient writers, such as Thessalos and Pausanias, have told the story of the massacre of Kira in 585 BC. In this tragedy, as many as 20,000 people may have been wiped out in just a few days. But each account differs so wildly from the others that historians are unsure what actually happened. Classical historian Bettany Hughes has traveled to Kira to try and determine some of the hard facts behind the tales.
It's a really, really exciting time to be looking at this subject because often people look back at the myths and the legends of the ancient world and imagine they're just kind of fairy tales. But if you can embrace science and add it to these stories, it means that we can stop looking back at these legends as if they are just fairy tales and watch them move closer and closer and closer to fact.
On the shores of the Aegean Sea once stood the bustling port of Kira. It was one of the most important cities in the ancient world, with many leaders and dignitaries passing through. The one thing the ancient accounts do agree on is that within a few short weeks, Kira, along with all its inhabitants, was wiped off the map.
This was the dock of Kira, and when you come here, it's almost as if you can hear the ghosts of the past. You can imagine all those traders coming here and selling their exotic wares from all over the known world. But then, over a period of just a few days, all of that is silenced. And as you stand here, it's almost as if the episode itself has been silenced.
The reason lies 8 miles up the hill from Kira at the site of the legendary Oracle of Delphi.
It's thought that you come here to hear the word of the god Apollo himself, to hear his oracle.
The ancients believed that the god Apollo revealed the future through the enigmatic utterances of a priestess, the oracle. Interpreted by priests and believed by everyone to be divine revelations, her prophecies were immensely powerful.
You get the heads of state, you get kings and ambassadors and generals coming here, asking the really big questions of life. You know, should we go to war? Should we sue for peace? Should we invade that country? So this place was of seminal importance to the Greeks.
Pilgrims to Delphi brought gifts for the god, the greatest riches they could afford.
Delphi was a place that was oozing with treasure. This was a really, really rich religious site. And therefore, of course, people were very keen to control access to it.
The main access was through the port of Kira.
The Kirans have got a bit cocky. They've started to tax people as they go into the site of Delphi.
The priests of Delphi appealed to a federation of rich and powerful Greek states called the Amphictyonic League. The league had been set up to protect the strategic interests of temples and religious festivals across Greece. Whether the influential priests were angry at losing income or really believed the Kirans were committing sacrilege is not known. What is known is that they appealed to the god Apollo for guidance.
And Apollo sends back a momentous and fearful response. He says that what the Amphictyonic League has to do is to effect a total war. They say that this is a land that should bring forth deformed children, that the land should be barren, that no trees should grow here, and that the whole of the population, almost like ethnic cleansing, should be utterly wiped out.
Feeling emboldened by the support of the god, the League began to plan the extermination of Kira. But such destruction in ancient Greece was a grave challenge. Apart from the moral issues, there were practical considerations. The ancient Greeks did not possess the weapons of mass destruction that we have today. What could they do? The League called in Solon, ruler of Athens, one of the largest, wealthiest, and most advanced of the ancient Greek cities.
And he comes up with a really outrageously ambitious idea.
Solon made a decision that would change the rules of warfare to the present day. According to the ancient texts, in the first act of its kind in history, he decided to poison the entire city of 20,000 people. He noticed that Kira was fed by a single river.
Where I'm standing now, you would hardly believe it, in this baking noon heat, is the riverbed of the river Pleistos. And at one point, this was the lifeblood of the city. This was the river that brought fresh water into the town. What they do is they collect a plant called hellebore.
This is where the ancient accounts differ greatly. Some say Solon discovered the pipe that took the water from the river to the city, smashed it, and pushed the plants in. Others say he dammed the river, filled the reservoir with the plant, and then released the dam and its toxic contents.
One of the sources says that Solon threw the roots of hellebore into the water. He waited until it was infected with the poison. And we don't quite know what's going on there. What does that mean? How does he know when it's sufficiently infected?
By using modern science to determine exactly how hellebore poisons water, Bettany will know whether Solon would have needed to let the poison stew behind a dam, or could have chopped the plant straight into the river itself.
Now we can analyse hellebore, just try to work out what is the active ingredient, just how potent it is, what kind of concentrations you have to use it to really have full impact.
Bettany is joined by chemist Tim Gallagher. They're going to analyse the specific characteristics of one of the first known cases of biological warfare.
We can take the roots, which is where most of the toxins are. That's going to go into the water, let it stand for 15 or 20 minutes, take the samples of the water every 10 minutes, and we'll build up a profile of how much toxin we're producing from the roots in the water as a function of the number of plants and the time as well.
Bettany and Tim send their samples to the lab. How toxic is the plant, and how much of it did the ancient Greeks need to put into the water?
The agents within the rhizomes test positive for alkaloids, and certainly one of them which is known to be a toxic alkaloid.
The tests show that hellebore roots are highly toxic. It also proves that the concentration of toxic chemicals in the water would have reached a critical level within only a few hours.
The results are fascinating because they absolutely back up what's written in the ancient sources. These specimens of hellebore contain some really nasty alkaloids, a kind of cocktail of chemicals.
Bettany is now confident that she knows how the ancients deployed this deadly plant.
The toxins seep straight into the water. I mean, that's all you have to do. So when we chopped up our samples and put them into the water, that's all they would have had to have done in the 6th century BC.
This suggests that part of the mystery surrounding the tale of the massacre can be solved. Our tests have revealed that it is feasible that all Solon and his men had to do was chop the hellebore directly into the water supply. The rest was left to chemistry.
Its effects were absolutely debilitating on the population that was held inside Kira. It's really nasty, and its impact is absolutely indiscriminate. First of all, it was the women and children who died. Then it was the soldiers.
The city was annihilated. War had taken a new and terrifying turn.
This was a really significant moment in the history of ancient Greece. This is something that goes against every code of military conduct that the ancient Greeks have. For the ancient Greeks, warfare is an aristocratic and an honourable thing. This is something where you do have to play fair, where you don't kill civilians.
Ancient discoveries has revealed that the legend of a terrifying biochemical act of genocide is grounded in fact. Science helps us understand the reality of the destruction of Kira. The atrocity so dishonored the men who perpetrated it that they rewrote the rules of ancient Greek warfare.
The Amphictyonic League passed a decree saying that from now on in, warfare should not involve biological elements, that you should not poison the water supply of an enemy. However much you need to get at their town, this is just playing dirty.
This decree is echoed in today's prohibition by international treaty of biological weapons of war. But many legitimate weapons deliberately or unintentionally target civilians. Armies use landmines, cluster bombs, and delayed action bombs triggered by their victims. Terrorists use roadside bombs, booby traps, and letter bombs. Remarkably, such devices date from the very invention of explosives. In asymmetric warfare, where a small irregular force is fighting a regular army, improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, are crucial to the guerrilla. Triggered remotely by their unsuspecting victims, they allow an insurgent militia to attack the enemy from a distance.
If you're a minority group, or particularly a very small cell of a minority group, there's not many opportunities to actually cause damage. So these kind of technologies are really the last resort. These are the only things that they can use to actually make their point.
Ancient texts from the 16th century include designs for some remarkable and astonishingly intricate bombs, the forerunners of today's IEDs. But who designed them? How did they work, and who were their targets? The 16th century was a time of extraordinary mechanical invention.
Lots of people are writing kings, dukes, patrons, saying, I can make you a fantastic machine which will kill your enemies.
It was also a time when state-sponsored assassination flourished. It was less expensive and dangerous to murder a leader than take on his army in battle.
But how do you get to the guy? You may not be able to get an assassin anywhere near him. You may have bodyguards.
One answer was a so-called infernal machine.
What is meant by an infernal machine is something which is secretive, something which is disguised as something else. So you get a letter bomb, a parcel to the post, a chest that when you open it has some sort of device which would explode.
In the 16th century, an armourer and engineer in Poland, Wolf von Senftenberg, designed all manner of weapons, only some of which were ever used. He's best known for his work on cannons and the technology of undermining fortifications. But what's less well known is that he also described what might be the first letter bomb in history. Records tell of a mysterious package delivered to a Prince Ivan Shusky in 1581. He was one of many princes seeking to stamp their mark on medieval Europe, and like all minor princes, was not short of enemies. Ancient Discoveries model maker Richard Windley is attempting to recreate this early IED.
It's a parcel bomb, slightly bigger, slightly more cumbersome, but to all intents and purposes, it's exactly the same thing. My challenge really was to think of a way, given this early date, how could they have done this? We know they had the black powder, we know they could explode it, but there's got to be a way of igniting it.
In his attempt to solve this mystery, Richard has tracked down a description of an ignition device written by Samuel Zimmermann in 1573. He wrote of a spring mechanism in which stone and steel come together so that fire at all times comes to light.
Although that doesn't tell us much, it can only be this. It can only be a wheel lock.
Developed in the 16th century, the wheel lock was the first self-igniting mechanism.
There's a little wheel which has got serrations on it.
The wheel is attached to a tightly coiled spring released by a trigger.
When the trigger's pulled, we pull that little wheel whips around very, very sharply.
Above the wheel is a piece of iron pyrite.
And the friction between the serrations and the pyrite causes a little shower of sparks, and those sparks are enough to light the priming powder. So in effect, it's not much different to a modern throwaway lighter.
With the invention of the wheel lock, the booby trap bomb was now feasible.
The beauty of the wheel lock for some sort of remote detonating device is the fact it's small, it's easily concealed, and its main attribute really is the fact it can be set and it'll just sit there and sit there and sit there until that trigger is pulled.
We've unlocked only part of the secret of the first parcel bomb. The wheel lock needs something to trigger it.
Really, the clever bit is the trigger. And this is actually very, very simple. One of the nails in the lid of the thing comes out. We thread the triggering cord through that. Replace the nail in there, which pinches the cord and stops it from moving. There's no reason at all why anybody would suspect this.
When the lid is opened, the cord pulls the trigger, causing the wheel to spin, creating a spark. This lights a fuse and ignites a compartment full of gunpowder. But how much damage could a bomb like this cause? There's only one way to find out. On a test site in an isolated quarry, Richard is going to detonate the medieval chest bomb. Helping with the experiment is Brad, an ancient discoveries test dummy.
We're assuming that if someone is going to receive this chest, they don't know what it is, they don't know if it's a gift, they don't know if it's containing documents. They'll probably be sitting at a desk, at their leisure almost, so they're probably just going to be dressed in ordinary everyday clothes.
A vulnerable position to be in with a bomb containing 5 pounds of gunpowder only 18 inches away.
We can't obviously set this off by hand, so what we're going to do is attach a cord to this and we're going to open the lid remotely from a fairly safe distance.
It's fair to assume that von Semptenberg would have tested his prototype device in this way. As it opens, the chest explodes in flames, right in the face of its victim.
His clothing's all burned away. He's got the full blast in the face. Certainly he'd be blind, he'd be deaf. He'd be seriously injured. These burn marks all around the bottom of his neck here. And you can actually see the traces of the blast mark in carbon across his face. It probably would have killed him either in the short or long term.
The chest bomb was based on the most sophisticated technology of its time. It was ingenious and lethal. But the bomb didn't kill Ivan Shusky. Princes don't open their own parcels.
It would have succeeded, but the wrong person opened the box and got killed, which obviously is the case, very often the case nowadays with like letter bombs and parcel bombs.
In the hands of insurgents, simple IEDs can hold professional armies at bay.
The real object of those guerrilla war tactics is not the total defeat of the enemy's army by physical force. It's the breaking of their will. If you break the morale of an army, you've won the campaign. So, no wonder the regulars call this dirty and underhand. From their point of view, it's despicable.
Survival expert Andrew Price is about to leap off a 150-foot limestone cliff using only a rope to break his fall. A rope he has made himself, from nettles, a plant which grows wild across all of Europe.
I was afraid if I tested it out, I'd break it, so this is actually the first time this will be tested with my own weight.
Andrew is investigating a daring escape that began a manhunt for one of history's greatest revolutionary leaders, Spartacus.
Spartacus is important because he is the little man who came from nowhere and took on a gigantic, corrupt organization and scared it to its roots.
The story begins in Rome over 2,000 years ago, in the arena. The gladiator was a type of slave. He was not free. Stables of warriors were owned and could be bought and sold by wealthy businessmen who rented them out to fight. Life in the arena was spectacular, but fatal.
They were there as crowd pleasers, and they were there to die. I mean, that is the bottom line about gladiators. However well you train them, and however hard they work, and however successful they are, one day they are going to die. And that really is what the crowd wants to see.
Most gladiators were former soldiers, either prisoners of war or convicts from the Roman army. Having known freedom, some wanted it back. One such man was a gladiator called Spartacus. Born in 109 BC, Spartacus was a foreign soldier who'd been taken captive by the Roman army and sold to become a gladiator.
We have to remember that Spartacus's generation were largely ex-soldiers. They were prisoners of war. These are not men who have grown up in servitude. These are men who resent the fact that somebody has come along, beaten them in battle, put them in chains, and told them what to do.
In 73 BC, Spartacus and 70 followers escaped from a gladiator school in southern Italy. The The gladiators fled to the top of a nearby mountain, where they were joined by other slaves searching for freedom.
You make for high ground because then you can see where the opposition's going to come from.
3,000 Roman soldiers hunted them down. The Roman force was led by a commander named Claudius Glaber. He realized that the mountain was ringed by tall cliffs, impossible to climb. There was a single pass, the only way up or down. He set up camp on Spartacus's only escape route. Now all he had to do was wait.
He's not expecting any kind of trouble here. These are slaves, these are runaways. He's going to just mop them up. He knows that eventually they're going to run out of water, and when they come down, he will simply destroy them. He hasn't got enough men for a full frontal assault.
It's then that Spartacus showed the genius that made him a great leader.
This is the only recorded use of it I've ever come across in ancient or medieval warfare. It's abseiling, and it is brilliant.
Ancient sources describe how Spartacus and his men cut down vegetation and wove it into ropes for climbing down the cliffs to the plain below. But ancient writers often exaggerated stories of heroes and villains. Is it possible to improvise a rope out of common plants that can take a man's weight? Survival expert and climber Andrew Price is finding out with the nettle.
Obviously, the situation would require a lot of improvising, but, I mean, people in a tricky situation are very good at putting things like that together. All plants will have fibers, but some plants have long fibers. A nettle has a fiber that runs from the root base right up to the top leaves of the plant. So those fibers, being so long, are ideal for cord. They're very strong as well.
The fibers are left in the sun to dry for up to 3 days.
We get a few fibers, twist them one way, then wrap them over the other way. And then as the tension is released on that, then it pulls it all together. Once you've made one thread, you then make extra threads and onwards. You could make a rope, 5-6 times as thick as this if you needed to.
As night fell, Spartacus and his men stood on the cliff edge. On the other side of the mountain awaited 3,000 highly trained Roman legionaries with a single mission: to kill them. It was a 2-mile descent to the plain below. Spartacus could not know if the hurriedly improvised ropes were long enough to reach the bottom of the cliffs. He could not be sure they would take the weight of the men and their weapons, and he could not confirm if the Romans had posted sentries. Andrew, too, braves the unknown. He tests his improvised nettle rope by lowering himself down and pushing away from the cliff. Will it take his weight?
Well, the rope works perfectly well. I put my full weight on it, even jumped on it. So I'd say that would be a complete success. So I've no doubt that a group of guys in a situation like Spartacus would have had no trouble making a rope that strong and getting them all down off the mountain.
In a matter of hours, Spartacus and his men reached the plains below. Silently, they skirted the mountain and took the Roman camp by surprise. A few hundred slaves and gladiators took on 3,000 Roman troops.
They can't believe that suddenly, where they thought they had an enemy in front of them on high ground, slowly suffering from thirst and starvation, they're actually running at them from one side, and all hell breaks loose.
The Roman force was obliterated. Spartacus and his army eluded capture for more than a year. Before it was over, 70,000 slaves from across Italy had joined the revolt. They defeated 6 more legions in battle, and Spartacus became a legendary figure, still renowned today.
We make him into a hero. To us, he is the guy on the white horse. He is the man who will always come to our rescue. However bad our situation may be, somewhere among us is a Spartacus. Somewhere among us is a man like that who is going to strike a blow for his freedom and for ours.
But Spartacus was not the only man to rise against Rome. Another revolutionary annihilated Roman legions with a weapon we still fear today. By the 1st century BC, the Roman military machine had encircled the Mediterranean. It occupied 2.5 million square miles from the Atlantic to the deserts of Arabia.
Nothing would stop the might of Rome. But you've got to couch that with, did Rome have the right to trample all over the world?
Roman expansion was challenged by the kingdoms in its path. In 83 BC, King Mithridates took up arms against the Roman invaders.
Mithridates was the heir to a kingdom on the southern shores of the Black Sea in Asia Minor. It's now part of modern-day Turkey.
The Roman army was the finest in antiquity. Conventional military tactics and weapons could not resist it. Only unconventional measures could stop the mighty warriors using force and fear.
Fire is one of those brilliant weapons that scares the living daylights out of everybody, amateurs and professionals alike. It's an absolutely primeval human emotion. We're all frightened of fire.
Fire is the ultimate weapon of terror.
Even in the 21st century, what do we see when insurgents start attacking regular troops? They don't front up and fight like regulars. They throw petrol bombs and Molotov cocktails.
Mithridates ordered his men to hurl a substance called burning mud at the Roman ranks. The Roman writer Pliny records an event in 69 BC when the Romans laid siege to the fortified city of Samosata in modern-day Turkey. The defenders used flaming mud. When poured onto the attackers, it burnt them alive in their armor. But can mud really burn? It depends what the mud is made of.
Clearly, what was being used is something that looked like mud or had the consistency of mud, but was combustible. We think that was some form of crude oil product. It was a thick, oil-like substance like bitumen. They recognized that it was flammable, and they also, I guess, recognized that it had properties to stick to things, and so if it was burning, made a very effective weapon.
Tim has synthesized this 2,000-year-old weapon in the lab.
So this was actually bitumen with some petroleum jelly, and you can see it's a thick treacle-like substance.
Tim wants to discover exactly how it works. Will it stick to the soldier's armor? Will it burn the man inside?
It's burning fiercely, it's mobile, it's beginning to run off into the tray underneath.
But instead of staying alight on the metal armor, the burning mud runs off. Is there a mystery ingredient Tim has missed? Another ancient text mentions a key ingredient called taupe.
The closest thing we have is hessian, is sacking, to provide me with a sticky, pasty-like material that will bind on to the flaming mud.
Tim has acquired a replica suit of Roman armor and has brought it to the Ancient Discoveries fire testing site. The Romans wore plate armor known as lorica segmentata. This comprised 34 sheets of 1/16-inch iron stitched together with leather straps to create a protective yet flexible layer weighing only 17 pounds. How will the addition of taupe, or hessian, change the way the burning mud behaves? The results are startling.
That's amazing. The effect is totally different. It's ignited instantly, it's holding itself alight. The two things that are most dangerous for the soldier, the first and probably most dangerous one, is the fact that you've got this very localized heating. He is being roasted inside that part of his armor. The second thing that's happening is you can see that the material is running down, melting and dropping and burning. That's going to fall over his arms, onto other parts of his body, so he becomes a human torch. So this really puts this man out of action.
The flaming mud heats up the metal and burns the leather. This creates a self-replenishing reservoir of blazing oils stuck to the soldier's armor.
It got inside the armor and clearly was just devastating.
Mithridates' use of burning mud helped him become one of Rome's most infamous enemies. His resistance lasted 25 years, and he delivered some of the most devastating defeats the Roman Republic had seen. But eventually, even fire could not overcome the might of Rome. In 63 BC, Mithridates was finally vanquished. Rome now ruled in the east. Several hundred years later, Rome was faced with a dissident force more powerful than any army of men. It was confronted by belief. By the 4th century AD, the official religion of the Roman Empire was Christianity. This time, it was the Romans who used fire to wipe out religious dissenters, pagans.
For thousands of years, or maybe even for tens of thousands of years, the world, and in particular the Eastern Mediterranean, the Middle East, has been a place full of gods. And because of that, paganism could be very tolerant. It could allow the gods from different societies to be worshipped together by new adherents. Of course, with the advent of Christianity, there is only one God, and there is only one way to worship that great God.
In 325 AD, the Emperor Constantine declared that Rome was Christian.
After hundreds of years of being a persecuted religion, suddenly the tables turn a bit, and once Christianity is on top, it's the Christians who, in a sense, become the persecuting majority rather than the persecuted minority.
An incident in the early 5th century AD exemplifies persecution by Christians using fire. An ancient writer, Mark the Deacon, records that an unknown number of pagan priests had taken refuge in a temple in the city of Gaza. A number of Christians, their identities and motives unknown, set fire to the temple to force the pagans out. A mysterious ancient writer known only as the Christian Oracle states that the fire was so hot it melted the bronze doors of the temple. But bronze melts at about 1750 degrees Fahrenheit. A standard bonfire is only about 800 degrees. How was this possible? Could the ancient sources be exaggerating the ferocity of the attack?
It's always been very difficult to understand exactly how they did it. How are they going to get a temperature high enough to break it down?
The Christian Oracle states that the deadly concoction was pitch, probably a naturally occurring type of crude oil, sulfur, and pig fat. It was these simple ingredients that raised the temperature of the fire enough to melt metal.
We are going to do our damnedest to try and melt these things. I don't think it's going to work, but I may be proven wrong. I don't know.
Bethany brings in Tim Gallagher.
Because at the moment, it looks just like a kind of regular bonfire.
With a few exotic ingredients. We've got the sulfur, the pig fat, which we've melted, and the pitch. And hopefully that will get hot enough to melt the metal. And that means about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Goodness me, the heat is unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we're going to have to move in a
Look at the doors. Look at the doors.
They're already buckling and
buckling.
discolouring. You can see, we'd be able to see through into the temple
Oh, yeah.
itself.
That's going to put all that hot air and hot gas into the temple.
Yeah.
And make life very unpleasant inside.
It is horrible, because this isn't just a science experiment. In Gaza, there were men trapped inside that building who presumably by this point would be
cooked,
asphyxiated, and praying to their gods to the very last, presumably.
Bethany and Tim leave the fire for 4 hours.
Wow, that's some action in there. Ooh. Oh, yay. Whoa, it's too hot.
Big holes burnt through down on the base here. Whoa. 980.
Tim's laser thermometer records a core temperature of 980 degrees Celsius. That's 1,796 degrees Fahrenheit, well above the melting point of bronze. The ancient writers have been proved accurate. The pig fat bitumen mixture has melted the bronze doors.
It's melted away.
But it also means that they knew the recipe to get it hot enough.
Pig fat burns at a much higher temperature than wood because of the energy stored in the fat cells. Though it needs much more heat to start burning in the first place, it also burns up to 4 times longer than wood.
These aren't people who are mucking around. This is not just a mutilation of the temple.
No.
They're wanting to wipe it off the face of the earth,
planned
aren't they?
and executed thoroughly. Here, just in the space of a few hours, we've destroyed the base of those doors completely.
The sky would have been orange with flame, and in a way it was a message that was being sent out to the world. The Christians had arrived and they were going to eradicate paganism, wipe it off the face of the earth.
Faced with the ruthless Christian persecution of the first millennium, the old beliefs of antiquity withered away. Next, Ancient Discoveries travels to Vietnam. There, we reveal an ancient military instruction manual that contains designs for a trap used to terrorize American troops in the 20th century and Mongol invaders 700 years earlier. Ancient Discoveries has located the manual that the nation of Vietnam used to mount revolutionary guerrilla wars both against the United States in the 20th century and against the world superpower of 700 years earlier, the Mongols. In 1286 AD, the army of the great Kublai Khan was on the rampage.
They traveled fast, they didn't take any prisoners, and if you resisted, you were likely to die.
With China secure, the Mongols swept through Southeast Asia, deep into the country we now call Vietnam.
If I imagine myself as this humble villager, just eking out his living, and I hear that these beasts of terror, the Mongols have got a reputation for absolute horror, and they're coming. That means my wife is likely to be raped, my children forced into servitude, and myself certainly killed.
Then an extraordinary man changed the course of history. His name was Tran Hung Dao.
A leader from Vietnam is starting to galvanize the population to resist this Mongol horde that's coming to sweep through these hills.
He and his men traveled from village to village with a proclamation of resistance, a call to stand and fight the invaders. Tran Hung Dao announced that he'd compiled a comprehensive manual of guerrilla warfare that could be issued to every citizen. If they followed its guidance, they would defeat the Mongol enemy.
This book is a way of codifying a vast amount of experience and organizing it in a way that makes it easy to access. It's a manual of guerrilla warfare.
This remarkable book reveals the secrets of Tran Hung Dao's guerrilla warfare weapons and tactics.
It's the ultimate beginner's guide in how to fight your own guerrilla war.
Experimental archaeologist John Naylor has traveled to Vietnam to discover exactly how the words and images in Tran Hung Dao's book translate into reality. The book contains clear instructions as to how to make a stake pit booby trap.
Tran Hung Dao says to dig the pit and then fill it with stakes. Stakes cut from this bamboo forest here. Then camouflage the pit so that the unwary Mongols will plunge through the camouflage and impale themselves on the stakes inside.
The thick clay soil makes for exhausting digging.
Well, that's been hot, tiring work. Now the book says I need to use some of this bamboo from the jungle to make the mechanism for the trap.
The stakes for the pit would have been made from bamboo. The plant grows all over Southeast Asia and is used in every aspect of life. It's easy to cut, cheap and plentiful.
My materials are literally growing on trees. This is a war factory.
But freshly cut bamboo is too flexible to use as a lethal spike.
To make it sharp and hard, we need to harden it in the fire.
It's been known since prehistory that heat causes bamboo to dehydrate and become as hard as iron.
Basically, it's the same way as when you overcook a steak. If you cook a steak, it goes from very soft to hard. If you overcook it, so I'm overcooking the bamboo and turning it into a hard, sharp recipe of death.
It's taken John less than an hour to construct one of Tran Hung Dao's booby traps from scratch, using just jungle materials and a simple knife and spade, tools available to the insurgent militias of Vietnam. Using simple age-old technology, the Vietnamese turned the jungle against the Mongol invaders. But the design doesn't stop with ordinary stakes. It describes an even more lethal enhancement, spiked rollers.
I've dug my pit, I've placed the stakes in the bottom, and I've added the rollers, exactly as shown in Tran Hung Dao's manuscript. That is absolutely horrible. However you go into that, it's either going to get you through the bottom, through the sides, and even on the top. To try and pull your leg out would cause more damage.
A Mongol soldier who stepped into the trap would have been impaled up to the knee. The rollers would have skewered the muscles of his leg.
Now all that remains is to disguise this and hide it so the next Mongol soldier who comes up the path is going to fall in it. Booby traps on the surface might seem to be a very small, ineffective weapon, but used in large numbers, it's an aerial denial weapon. It stops troops occupying land.
In the 20th century, copies of the designs in this ancient manual were circulated by the Viet Cong. The same tactics and devices were replicated in every detail during the Vietnam War. They accounted for an extraordinarily high proportion of American casualties. But it's not only the body count that was significant.
It's a psychological effect. It creates fear in the hearts of the enemy soldier. It makes the enemy unwilling to advance, makes the enemy unwilling to engage. If you've broken his will to win before you join battle, you've already won the battle.
During the Mongol invasion, forced entry into Vietnam by land failed and the Mongols withdrew, only to mount a seaborne invasion in 1288. The Mongol fleet was the largest that had ever been put to sea, as many as 800 vessels. How could Trang Hun Dao prevent the Mongols from coming round the coast and attacking from the shore? His answer was to use the same concept as the stake pit on a scale that had never been seen before. These ancient submerged stakes are all that remains of one of the largest booby traps in history. A trap designed to take out an entire battle fleet.
Tran Hung Dao prepared for this battle within 15 days and encouraged the local citizens to take part. He had his soldiers and the local people produce huge steel-tipped wooden stakes by cutting down the dense forest.
The Mongol fleet was sailing upriver from the sea when lookouts spotted a flotilla of Vietnamese vessels. Thinking they had an easy target, the unsuspecting Mongols gave chase.
Tran Hung Dao's genius is to lead the Mongol fleet upriver, to lure them to follow what seems to be a small enemy force, and then when the tide falls, the Mongols find themselves trapped over the top of a bed of spikes. These spikes go straight through the bottom of their ships, pinning the ships in position and sinking them, and then the Vietnamese strike from ambush.
With their fleet impaled, the Mongols were sitting ducks. Trang Hung Dao destroyed them.
Within a day, Tran Hung Dao's tactics had killed 6,000 Mongol soldiers and destroyed over 400 ships.
The devastating blow, the last great offensive by the Mongols, is broken.
Using this manual, a small, impoverished nation had beaten off a great power. Over the following centuries, it became a textbook for resisting invasion, occupation, and colonization.
The Vietnamese just aren't going to surrender their independence. Not to the Chinese, not to the Americans, not to the French. They're going to fight to the end. And they'll use any means they can.
The book, The Secret to the Survival of Vietnam, remains locked away under tight national security, its deadly contents safely preserved, just in case the Vietnamese are ever called upon to face another invasion force and open its pages once again.